For more on this, we're joined by former U.S. diplomat Jim Jatras. Jim, thank you for joining me.
Thank
we
you.
were together last night doing the coverage of the State of the Union. I was watching your face as President Trump was addressing this. So now we go to Secretary of State Pompeo has told the U.S. allies that President Trump's troop withdrawal from Syria does not mean they are ending the fight against ISIS and that we will continue to see some sort of presence in Syria. What does that mean?
Well, what it means is that, and I think Secretary Pompeo knows this very well, our purpose in being in Syria has really nothing to do with ISIS. ISIS is the pretext. We are there to counter the Iranians, counter the Russians, put pressure on the Syrian government, and that's the mission that he wants to continue despite the president's clear desire to get American troops out of there, where they're there illegally, by the way. And unfortunately, I think not just Mr. Pompeo, but Mr. Bolton and others in the administration, plus their supporters on Capitol Hill, will move heaven and earth to try to prevent at least a total pullout of Americans from Syria.
Well, that's the thing. You look at last night what President Trump said. Did you feel confident when he said it? Sounded like it was pretty strong, for at least the paragraphs that he devoted to it in his speech, that he was still going to stay on this plan. In his mind, he thinks these troops are actually coming home. He's repeated that over and over and again. Do you think at some point he's going to get the clue in that all the guys are not on the same page as he is?
Oh, I think he knows they're not the same page as he is. The question is whose will prevail? Is he the president or is John Bolton president? And that's what I guess we're going to find out. This tug of war will go on. I think he could win this, but it's not going to be easy for him.
Well, that's the question. So now we got to talk about put your money where your mouth is. And we're going to talk about the presence that is in Syria right now. Is there any benefit right now to the United States, whether we're talking about national security or we're talking about stabilizing the region? Do we actually provide that right now, or is there another reason why they're so set on making sure that we have soldiers over there?
No, this has nothing to do with stabilization of the region. This is part of a plan to destabilize Syria, to have a regime change in Syria. And as the 19th century French statesman said, our opponents say our policy has failed. Is that any reason to abandon it? Just because the policy has failed, they are still churning, still stirring the pot, because what they're really worried about is how do we counter the Iranians? And of course, remember, even President Trump has said we need to stay in Iraq in order to counter the Iranians.
Well, that's the thing. Senior Iranian official Ali Akbar Valiates called on the U.S. to keep their promise and withdraw troops. So they want us out of there. So is this the type of comment that is going to draw the ire of the hawks in Trump's cabinet, that even President Trump's going to go, oh, well, if they want us gone, then we don't like them, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, we're going to stay?
Of course, of course.
So should they just keep their mouth shut?
I'm not going to advise them what they should do, but the fact is that if they say they want something, that's a red flag in front of a bull. Say, well, then we should do the opposite.
So if we do withdraw from Syria, the one question that people continuously ask, does that mean that Syria is being basically left with this void that possibly could be filled with terrorism, like what we saw in Iraq? Is there, we're still around in the area, so if there was needed attention by the U.S., how quickly could we be mobilized to help if needed?
With all due respect, Scottie, I think it's a silly question, not yours, but whoever's asking that question, because that's not going to happen. And even the story about Iraq in the vacuum, that's nonsense too. None of that would have happened if we hadn't toppled the government of Iraq. The fact is, if we pull out of Syria, the Russian Air Force, the Syrian army, with help from the Iranians and Hezbollah, will kill ISIS, every single one of them. The only reason there's any ISIS presence left now is because there's still some people in our government, with some of our allies, as we saw in the setup piece, who built ISIS into a force in the first place, who want to keep it there as one of their tools for affecting the outcome on the ground.
What role does Saudi Arabia? That was something the president did not mention last night, which I found to be very curious. What role does Saudi Arabia play in all of this?
Well, despite all the talk that Iran's the world's #1 sponsor of terrorism, it's Saudi Arabia, far and away. And everybody knows that. And again, this is part of the hypocrisy behind American policy. We say we're fighting terrorism, the Iranians, when we're allied with Saudi Arabia, who are the biggest supporters of terrorism, including the people who brought ISIS and al-Qaeda into Syria.
Well, it seems like while the Iranians are talking, the Saudis are being silent, and that's almost just as scary, I think, when it comes to these policies. Thanks for joining us.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.